First of all, take a flick. Take a flick. Come on, take a flick.
Yeah, I got Bel Air and Accessible.
A father believes the remains of his daughter, who went missing nearly a year ago, may have been found.
And today, investigators tell us they were back out at a site in Montgomery County where remains were found earlier this week.
She came to Houston for her birthday, 24 years old. Her whole future still ahead of her. She had a wide smile, a heart full of hope, and the kind of dreams that made her believe anything was possible. On Friday, April 15, 2022, at 3 a.m., Felicia Johnson walked out of her hotel near Houston's West Chase district. She wasn't with friends. She wasn't meeting family. She carried only her phone, her purse, and a birthday card from her father. By 6:30 p.m. that same day, that phone would be found in the grass at Bear Creek Pioneers Park, smashed, blood-stained, abandoned. Her purse lay nearby. There was no sign of Felicia. No security footage showing where she went after she stepped out. No call to explain why she hadn't made it back. While her family searched desperately for answers, somewhere else in Houston, a man was sitting at a device, typing chilling queries. How to be a serial killer, whether bleach could destroy DNA, how long it takes before a missing person is declared dead. Felicia Johnson came to Houston on April 13, 2022, to celebrate her life, not to vanish. She was a daughter, a sister, a young black woman with ambition and love to give. But in less than 24 hours, she went from making plans for the future to becoming the subject of one of the most disturbing investigations this city has ever seen. What really happened to Felicia Marie Johnson? Felicia's killer is still out there. Like this video to keep her story alive. Subscribe for more cases that need answers, comment where you're watching from, and share this video. Because the more people who know, the closer we get to justice for Felicia Johnson. Felicia Marie Johnson was 24 years old, born and raised in San Diego, California. She was the oldest daughter in her family, a young woman whose personality filled every space she entered. Her family remembers her as joyful, quick-witted, and fiercely protective of the people she loved. Friends called her the life of the party, but that didn't mean she was reckless. She had plans, ambitions, and a determination to create a better life for herself and those closest to her. She loved music, took pride in her appearance, and had a laugh that could change the mood of an entire room. Those who knew her well said she could find common ground with anyone, whether they were a lifelong friend or a stranger she had just met. In early April of 2022, Felicia was looking forward to a milestone, her 24th birthday. On April 10th, she celebrated at home in San Diego with family and close friends. Photos from that day show her smiling widely, surrounded by balloons and birthday decorations, holding the kind of happiness that makes people believe the best days are still ahead. Her father, Kevin Johnson, spoke about how excited she was, not just for her birthday, but for what the future might hold. Just a few days later, Felicia packed her bags for Houston, Texas. She planned to spend time there, both for celebration and for opportunity. Some reports say she was hoping to secure work while in the city, possibly in the nightlife or entertainment industry. It wasn't unusual for young adults to travel for these kinds of opportunities, and for Felicia, Houston offered a chance to explore something new. She boarded her flight from San Diego on April 13, 2022, arriving in a city she had never visited before. Houston, with its fast pace, sprawling neighborhoods, and busy nightlife, was a change from her life in San Diego. Felicia checked into her accommodations and, according to investigators, began moving through the city in the days leading up to April 15th. At some point before that night, Felicia had been in communication with a man named Chukwuebuka Nwaobodo. Police records later revealed that their contact began through an online escort service. According to the information made public, Nwaobodo responded to an ad involving Felicia. This interaction would become a critical part of the investigation later on. This wasn't just a casual meeting between two strangers. Evidence would later show that in the early hours of April 16th, Nwobodo took active steps to meet Felicia. Felicia could not have known that the person she was preparing to meet would soon be accused of ending her life. The hours ahead would take her away from the safety of her family's voices, away from the dreams she had carried to Houston, and into the hands of a man who would become the primary suspect in a murder case that remains unresolved to this day. Friday, April 15, 2022, began like any other day for Felicia Johnson's family in San Diego, but in Houston, Texas, it was the start of the last hours anyone would see her alive. That evening, Felicia set out with the goal of securing work. She made her way to CoverGirl's nightclub on West Little York Road. According to what would later be confirmed by investigators, she went there hoping for a position but was turned away. From that point, the timeline became critical. In the days before, she had been exchanging messages with a man she didn't know well, 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwobodo. They had connected through an online escort service. The details of their arrangement would later be uncovered in charging documents, but what is certain is that he offered to meet her and arrange transportation. At approximately 2:56 a.m. on Saturday, April 16th, Nwobodo used his own Uber account to request a ride for Felicia. The driver was sent to pick her up from her hotel. That ride did not go directly to his current home. Instead, the Uber's destination was an apartment complex on Windchase Boulevard, an address where Nwobodo had previously lived. Once the driver reached the location, Felicia was met by Nwobodo in person. From there, she got into his vehicle, and he drove her to his apartment on South Richmond Avenue, in another part of the city. This was the final confirmed movement of Felicia Johnson. Surveillance records and ride history would later verify this sequence. From that moment on, Felicia's contact with her family stopped. She was someone who stayed connected, phone calls, texts, check-ins, but by that morning, all communication ceased. Her phone went silent, no outgoing messages, no activity on her accounts. Her father, Kevin Johnson, began calling repeatedly from California. The absence of any response was enough to push the family into action. When hours passed with no sign of her, they reached out to a private investigator. The investigator quickly set to work. Using technology to trace the last known location of her phone, they were led to Bear Creek Pioneers Park, a vast public park on the western side of Houston, known for its wooded trails, picnic areas, and open stretches of land. It was there, in an area near the park's open fields, that they found her phone lying on the ground. It wasn't just left behind, it had blood on it. A short distance away, her purse was also recovered. The location was not random. It was miles away from both her hotel and the suspect's apartment. Whoever left those items there wanted them gone from sight, but they had not been hidden well enough to escape notice. News crews later filmed search teams moving through the park. Volunteers, police officers, and members of Texas EquuSearch walked the grounds, marking areas, pushing through brush, and looking for any sign of Felicia or further evidence. Maps were brought out to mark where the phone and purse had been found, giving investigators a fixed point in a growing case file. The discovery was the first undeniable sign that Felicia had met with harm. It shifted her case from a missing persons report into a criminal investigation. And as police began tracing the hours before her disappearance, one name began to rise above all others. The trail of evidence from that night would soon lead directly to a single suspect, a man who, even after being charged with her murder, would manage to slip through the system and remain free. In the hours after Felicia Johnson's phone and purse were discovered in Bear Creek Pioneers Park, investigators began retracing her steps and zeroing in on the man she was last seen with, 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwobodo. The work started quickly. Detectives pulled surveillance footage, bank records, and digital data, looking for anything that could confirm where he had been and what he had done after Felicia vanished. What they found began to form a timeline that would become central to the case. On April 16th, just hours after Felicia was last known to be in his apartment, Nwobodo was spotted on surveillance cameras at a Walmart in Houston. His right hand was wrapped in a bandage. According to later court documents, he told a medical provider that he had injured it while opening boxes. The receipts and store footage showed otherwise. In the hours and days that followed, he purchased items that prosecutors would later argue were meant to conceal or destroy evidence: large trash bags, a flashlight, towels, and a mechanical saw. Additional footage placed him at Home Depot, continuing to buy supplies that investigators linked to the timeline of Felicia's disappearance. As police dug deeper, they turned to his online activity. Records obtained from his accounts revealed disturbing searches in the days after April 16th. Among them were phrases like "bleach destroyed DNA," "how to be a serial killer," and "how to get away with murder." Even as days passed and Felicia's family pleaded publicly for her safe return, his searches showed he was still looking for Houston escorts, 2 weeks after she went missing. On May 13th, investigators secured and executed search warrants for his vehicle and apartment. What they found inside his car was alarming: a gun, a shovel, a large kitchen knife, and latex gloves. In his apartment, they documented bloodstains, and forensic testing confirmed the presence of Felicia's DNA. These discoveries moved the investigation from suspicion to direct evidence tying Nwobodo to the crime. When detectives gained access to his seized cell phone, the findings were even more unsettling. According to court records, the phone contained a photograph of a dismembered woman whose identity could not be confirmed, along with images of other deceased individuals. Investigators could not immediately verify when or where the photos had been taken, but their presence strengthened the urgency of the case against him. This was not the first time Nwobodo had been in contact with law enforcement. Records show he had previously been investigated for an attempted sexual assault. In that case, the victim chose not to press charges, and the matter did not result in a conviction. The evidence against him was stacking up: purchases matching items seen in surveillance footage, incriminating search history, weapons and tools consistent with the disposal of evidence, and forensic proof linking him to Felicia. It was enough for police to formally identify him as their suspect. With each new discovery, the picture became clearer for investigators and darker for Felicia's family. With evidence mounting, police had their suspect. But what happened next would leave her loved ones stunned and furious. As the evidence against Chukwuebuka Nwobodo continued to mount, investigators believed they had enough to bring him in. But before the murder charge was formally filed, there was an encounter that could have changed everything. According to court records, Nwobodo was stopped by police during a traffic stop in the weeks after Felicia Johnson's disappearance. At that moment, he was briefly taken into custody. It could have been the turning point in the case, the moment where he would be held, questioned, and prevented from disappearing. But at the time of that stop, the murder charge had not yet been filed. Without that charge in place, there was no legal basis to keep him in custody. He was released. Detectives kept building the case, securing warrants, and piecing together the timeline that connected Felicia's last known movements to the suspect. By early June 2022, they were ready to act. On June 9th, the Houston Police Department publicly announced that they had charged 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwobodo with the murder of Felicia Johnson and with tampering with evidence in connection to her disappearance. The announcement was made alongside a clear message to the public. They needed help to find him. Wanted posters with his photograph were released. They included his name, his age, his physical description, and the charges he faced. The HPD press conference made it clear. They believed Nwobodo had killed Felicia and had taken deliberate steps to destroy evidence. Yet the urgency of the announcement was met with a troubling fact. By the time those charges were read out to the public, he was gone. In the days and weeks that followed, law enforcement agencies, including Crime Stoppers, circulated his image and offered rewards for information leading to his arrest. Calls came in, tips were checked, but he remained out of reach. For Felicia's family, the news was devastating. After weeks of waiting for progress, they now had confirmation that the man responsible for their daughter's death had been identified. but no assurance that he would be brought to justice anytime soon. They had to live with the knowledge that there had been a moment during that traffic stop when he was within reach of law enforcement, only to walk away before the most serious charges could be filed. By the time charges were announced, he was gone. And to this day, he remains at large. February 7th, 2023. It had been nearly 10 months since anyone had last seen Felicia Johnson. In Montgomery County, Texas, a contract worker was out in a remote section of the Sam Houston National Forest near Flamingo Lakes along Highway 149. This was not a place most people passed through on a normal day. It was quiet, heavily wooded, with thick underbrush and miles of isolation. While working in the area, the man came across something that stopped him in his tracks: human remains. Law enforcement was called immediately. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office responded, securing the site and beginning the delicate process of collecting evidence. Alongside the remains, investigators noted a trash bag that would be taken in for further examination. The discovery was grim, but for investigators, it was also a possible breakthrough in a case that had been desperate for answers. The remains were taken for forensic testing, and for weeks, the official identification process moved forward. DNA samples were compared, dental records examined, each step carried out with the weight of knowing that this could be the moment a family had feared for months. On February 27th, the confirmation came. Through DNA and dental record analysis, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office announced that the remains were those of 24-year-old Felicia Johnson. For her family, the news was a crushing blend of relief and grief. Her father, Kevin Johnson, spoke publicly about the bittersweet reality of the confirmation. He said that now, at least, he would be able to lay his daughter to rest, to give her the service and the respect she deserved. But the knowledge that she had been found in such a state, far from home and far from the life she should have been living, was a wound that could not be healed by closure alone. The site where she was found was documented from the air and on the ground. Aerial footage showed the dense trees surrounding the recovery area. On maps, it was marked as a location deep in the forest, far removed from the places she had last been seen. Evidence markers dotted the ground in news coverage, each one a reminder that this was a crime scene as well as a final resting place. Nearly a year after she vanished, Felicia was found, but finding her body was not the same as finding justice. The man accused of killing her was still out there, and for her family, the long wait for accountability was far from over. When Felicia Johnson's disappearance became public, the Houston community and beyond did not stand still. Texas EquiSearch, a well-known search and recovery organization, joined the effort early, deploying trained volunteers to comb through high-priority areas. They scoured sections of Bear Creek Pioneers Park, walked wooded trails, searched drainage ditches, and covered open fields. These were coordinated, methodical searches, often lasting hours in the Texas heat, with teams marking off grids and rechecking locations to make sure no clue was overlooked. Volunteers, many of them strangers to Felicia's family, gave their time and energy simply because they understood the urgency of finding her. Alongside the search teams, local activists made their voices heard. Community leader and activist Cornell X became a visible force in the push for justice. Standing at press conferences with Felicia's father and other supporters, he spoke directly to the man accused of her murder. He condemned the culture of silence that can sometimes take hold in communities, calling out what he described as the no-snitch mentality when it shields violent offenders. His message was pointed. This was not just about one case, but about the safety of women in the community and the responsibility to speak out when lives are in danger. The urgency behind these appeals was rooted in a painful truth. Across the United States, and in Texas in particular, Black women and girls face disproportionate risks when they go missing. National data and advocacy groups have documented patterns of delayed responses, limited media coverage, and lower clearance rates in cases involving Black women compared to their white counterparts. In Felicia's case, her family and supporters refused to let her story fade or be overlooked. They held rallies, spoke to news outlets, and pressed for updates from law enforcement, ensuring her name remained in public view. Press conferences showed lines of supporters holding signs with Felicia's photo, messages demanding justice, and calls for the suspect's capture. The images of searchers in high-visibility vests moving through tall grass, alongside family members clutching each other for strength, became symbols of both grief and determination. This was more than a search for one missing woman. It was a fight against a pattern that has left too many families without answers. For Felicia's loved ones, the community support mattered. It meant her life was valued, her case was visible, and her story was part of a larger demand for change. But the rallies, the searches, and the public calls for help all circled back to one urgent fact. The man charged with killing her was still out there, and until he was found, justice remained out of reach. Today, the man accused of taking Felicia Johnson's life is still not in custody. Houston Police Department and the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office continue to list 28-year-old Chukwuebuka Nwabodo as wanted. He is charged with murder and tampering with evidence in connection to her disappearance and death. His name, photograph, and description remain on law enforcement bulletins. Crime Stoppers of Houston has maintained an active reward for information that leads to his arrest. Felicia Johnson should be alive today. Her story cannot fade into the background. The man accused of killing her is still out there, and somewhere, someone knows where he is. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Chukwuebuka Nwabodo, contact the Houston Police Department's Homicide Division at 713-308-3600 or call Crime Stoppers at 713-222-TIPS. You can remain anonymous. Felicia's name must be remembered, not just as a victim, but as a daughter, a sister, and a young woman with dreams. She was loved, she mattered, and she deserved the chance to live the life she imagined for herself. Share her story. Demand justice. And if this case moved you, subscribe to keep these stories alive. The more people who know, the harder it becomes for her killer to hide. Justice for Felicia Johnson is long overdue, and with enough voices, it can no longer be delayed. If Felicia's story has stayed with you, don't let it stop here. Her family is still waiting for justice, and every share, every comment, and every conversation keeps her name alive. Like this video so her face stays in front of more people. Subscribe so you never miss another story that needs to be told. Leave a comment for her family. Let them know the world hasn't forgotten. And share this video with someone you know, because the more eyes we have looking, the fewer places her killer has to hide. Justice doesn't happen in silence. It happens when we speak, when we act, and when we refuse to let these stories fade.